Reporter Stephanie Ferrier joins us now from Melbourne. Steph, about an hour or so ago we had the figures through from Victoria for today, and it's a pretty sad state of affairs once again.
Yes, good morning, Joe. Sadly, we've got another 19 deaths here in Victoria. That's an equal record from yesterday, which was 19 deaths as well. So you can only imagine the heartache for countless families out there at the moment. And we saw a slight uptick also in the new case numbers, with 331 new cases identified. That's slightly up from our number yesterday, which was 322. It is still in the low 300s, which I guess is a good sign. It shows that we are continuing to go a little bit lower from that peak last Wednesday of some 720 odd. So we're hopeful that that might mean that we are turning the corner. But of course, we've still got, at last count, about 640 people in hospital, and 31 of the 47 in intensive care are being kept alive on ventilators. So the situation is still very, very precarious. Now, as you mentioned, we just had Premier Daniel Andrews. We were showing you that then, and he is still facing that parliamentary probe at the moment, and he has copped a bit of a grilling from some of the opposition members on that Public Accounts and Economics Committee. As you mentioned, he was asked why they used security guards. He said it was simply an extension of an already existing scheme. He was also asked whether or not he regrets that, and he said, well, you know, nobody wanted this second virus, and we didn't have the luxury of time. Whether or not it was fit for purpose is, he doesn't have answers to his satisfaction, and that is why he set up that independent inquiry led by the former Judge Jennifer Coates. But he was also told, the parliamentary inquiry earlier, that he will not be asking Jobs Minister Martin Pakula to resign over that botched hotel quarantine scheme. Now, a leaked video confirms that public servants from Global Victoria, that's the jobs agency, was in charge of logistics for setting up this scheme. But he says that the simple answer is no, he is not going to ask Martin Pakula to resign, nor did he say that there was problems in terms of Health Minister Jenny Mikakos being warned as early as May the 11th. He was asked about that, about infection control in the hotel quarantine system, and also that this Global Victoria group, or the government agency, set this up as some sort of massive global trade mission instead of looking at it as a potential health emergency. Let's have a bit of a listen to that question and answer situation that we've just heard at the inquiry.
This complete failure of government policy will surely be the most disastrous economic and social catastrophe in Victorian history. Premier, how will you take personal responsibility for this? You've told us on numerous occasions you will be personally responsible. What does personal responsibility mean?
Well, in the first instance, Mr. Reardon, it's not playing political games. I have not only accepted ultimate responsibility and accountability for any issues in that part of our pandemic response and all issues in our pandemic response, but I've established an appropriate arm's length process chaired by a former judge, not for the avoidance of scrutiny, not for the avoidance of answers, but to deliver that scrutiny and to provide the answers that all of us are fundamentally entitled to.
So that's the Premier Daniel Andrews there fronting that parliamentary probe, and we're also expected to see the Health Minister Jenny Mikakos quizzed on her role in this hotel quarantine scheme, as well as information from the state's Chief Health Officer, Professor Brett Sutton. But we're expecting to hear from Premier Daniel Andrews in a news conference a bit later on. He is scheduled to give evidence until at least 11 o'clock, so it won't be before then, and hopefully we'll get some further details and further breakdowns on the new case numbers, 331 here in Victoria, and sadly 19 deaths.
Okay, Stephanie Ferrier reporting there from Melbourne. Now, the situation in New South Wales over the past 2 or 3 weeks or so has been in stark contrast to what's happened in Victoria. New South Wales has successfully kept the numbers below 20. There's a bit of a concern today because that number has crept above 20, just 2. So New South Wales recorded 22 new cases of coronavirus in the past 24 hours. Reporter Jessie Dorset joins us now from Sydney. Jessie, g'day. So what can you tell us about these new cases?
G'day, Joe. The New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian is speaking now on the Central Coast, and she's just revealed today's figures a little earlier than usual. In the last 24 hours, 22 new infections have been detected across New South Wales. They include 4 people who are in hotel quarantine, returned overseas travellers. Then there are 2 people who contracted coronavirus in Victoria and returned to this state. And 8 cases are connected to the Tangara School for girls at Cherrybrook in Sydney's northwest. We've been watching this cluster grow over the last few days, and Miss Berejiklian says she expects it to get even bigger.
And so, Jesse, tell us about the situation on the South Coast.
Yeah, there are 3 students in Batemans Bay who've tested positive, and so today the Batemans Bay Public School and the Batemans Bay High School have both closed for cleaning while authorities determine who's had close contacts with the students. Before this small outbreak, the town hadn't recorded any new cases in several weeks. Of course, any outbreak in regional areas is a concern, and so a pop-up testing clinic has been set up in Batemans Bay. For anyone who may be watching in town who's a bit concerned, it's opened about an hour ago at the Hanging Rock Sports Complex in Batemans Bay, and it'll operate for the rest of the week. And I just also wanted to mention a situation in regional New South Wales as well, Joe, at the Murrin Bridge Aboriginal community. That's in the Central West. About 70 people there have been asked to self-isolate, and that's because the local land council issued a warning because a person from a Victorian COVID hotspot travelled there, they visited, and while they've tested negative and they haven't done anything wrong by travelling in this particular instance, the Land Council is being cautious because of the vulnerability of that community. Joe?
Clarifying, because we've been focusing on this Victorian media conference that's been happening, and these New South Wales figures have just come through. So of those, and it's a bit of a concern because it's above that 20 mark, of those 22, have you heard that there are any from unknown sources, or have they tracked all those 22 down to particular spots, or is that not clear at this stage?
I don't have that information just yet, Joe. The New South Wales Health sort of puts out a detailed release at 11 o'clock. So we'll be watching for that in the next 45 minutes. Because on Saturday, New South Wales got down to single digits for the first time in a fortnight. There were just 9 cases on Saturday, but the caveat on the weekend was a third of those we didn't know the source, and that's more of a concern for authorities. So that number we'll be looking for today.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, Jesse Dorset reporting there from Sydney.